Hey guys, welcome to Meets the Fighter. Today we have Omni to join us. How are you?
I'm doing grand.
So what is the thing you enjoy the most in your deck or playstyle right now?
I love the most about my deck and the way it allows me to play right now is the sheer aggression and kind of oppressive playstyle it lets me use. As Phaging, the stopper is going to be your strongest tool, and it allows for, and especially in this deck, it allows for constant guard pressure. My deck makes the most of this by building on places where the stopper can be safe to use. I quickly burn down someone's stamina bar, put them in an unfavorable spot, and it lets me kind of dictate the pace of the fight. Stay in as long as I want. Overall, it just gives you a lot of control in the fight, and that's what I like the most about it.
Tell us more about your deck. How does it work?
Well, first of all, I can't take all the credit for the deck. This one was put together actually by the Shade and Sir Arthur. The only bits I can really take credit for are your stock standard Phaging sidekick leg breaker with 212 frames and the nice little jump spin kick that's in there.
And I noticed last time I saw this deck, instead of gut punch it was stretch out hook. Why did you change that? I'm wondering.
Actually, for kind of two reasons. One was the stretch out hook was not being very consistent as a counter. I wasn't sure if it was the connection or whatever. But another reason is it wasn't a great pairing with Foot. Yeah, I know the timing difference is there for Windfall, but too high horizontals just I don't like it too much, and the gut punch wasn't a massive downgrade to the stretch out hook. It wasn't exactly losing out on 50 damage or anything. Like I said earlier, the deck is built around making this front stopper safe, so you can get the most out of it, Phaging, because that's your strongest tool, right? Pressure the enemy's guard, you want to break guard use, and that the stopper is great for that. The deck is all about making the stopper safe and letting you get in there and do whatever you want. So everything in this deck is kind of aimed at gaining at least +5 advantage on guard while you're in the front stance, so that you can keep the stopper safe and use it whenever you want. This way, you're forcing the opponent to choose between blocking your safe option, which is an 80 stamina damage move, or risking eating a nice 130 damage sidekick or leg breaker. This is all thanks to the stopper. It's your strongest tool, and this deck is just really focused on getting the most out of it. As Phaging, if you're not making the most out of the stopper, your deck could just be doing better on another style. Of course, the deck isn't all just stopper and sidekick. Here we can see. So, start off, one of our 12 framers is Fast Cross. Fast Cross is 6 on hit. Again, this makes the stopper safe. It's 4 on guard as well. And with the on guard, we can lead into Fencing Punch, which is 5 on guard. Fencing Punch leads us into Liver Knee, which is 6 on guard. This is all crane safe. And after the Liver Knee, the stopper, and this time also the sidekick, are safe again. So the deck is kind of taking away the option of interrupting, forcing the opponent to block, and when they block, the stopper is punishing that.
By the way, I'm wondering what is the frame data of front stopper? So how do you know that?
Front stopper is a 15 frame move. It has about 50 damage on hit, so it's actually. You see a lot of people making Phaging decks and they'll go, I can do a 33. Sounds good, but in reality, it is not that great. Just because 50 damage punish, it's not very nice. Just you're doing less than a 12 framer. You always want the stopper to land on guard, otherwise it's kind of useless. It's 15 frames startup, it's 8 frames of advantage on hit, and on guard, I'm not sure now if it's +5 or +6. I'm pretty sure it's +5. But most people don't like to challenge that anyway, and when you do stopper into sidekick, they'll just block it instead of risking interrupting your sidekick. Speaking of sidekick and legbreaker as well, sidekick is only 3 on guard, so when it hits on guard, the only thing it makes safe is the fast thrust. Not great. Legbreaker is 4 on guard, so it kind of makes the stopper crane safe. So this is useful, but the most useful part of these two is the on hit. Now these they confirm a jab on hit, but we don't really use that here because we'd end up butchering the whole deck trying to fit it in. But sidekick and legbreaker are both 10 advantage on hit. So every time they land on hit, they make each other safe. And they make the stopper safe. And despite the stopper only being 50 damage on hit, it is +8 on hit. So when the stopper lands on hit, again, sidekick and legbreaker are safe. The jumped spin kick back here is it just exists as a mix-up to the liver knee. This used to be temple knock underneath, but that string is not crane safe. Fencing punch into liver knee was already safe, so having an even safer option, but in reality wasn't safe, was not a great idea. So instead now there's jumped spin kick with a cut punch confirm. And this kind of adds a bit more risk to people wanting to avoid the liver knee. Up at the top again, we have your stock standard crane into flute combo. I think everybody knows this one. But this time is a bit extra. We have upper back fist. Now, upper back fist is very useful because it's safe after crane. It's also 5 on block, and you're back in the front stance. So again, stopper is safe. And it's 6 on hit. So if you actually landed on hit, both the stopper and the sidekick are safe. Now the spinning high kick is down here. Normally it's not really used. It would be used more so after Shadow Avoid. You do Shadow Avoid and you get your fast punch confirmed. After I use upper back fist, I usually go into either the stopper or sidekick, not into spinning high kick.
Yeah, also, I just noticed that stopper is just generally a very good mix-up against for spinning high.
Yes, stopper is very good, very strong move. And staging, it's the only thing you have that is good. Because your parries suck, your voids suck, but your stopper is amazing. So, have to make the most of it. Otherwise, you might as well be using your deck on another style. I would say I'm kind of vanilla at playing it. I know you had Methamos last time. Methamos uses a lot of unlock stuff.
Yeah.
He does a lot of difficult unlock stuff, but there's also a lot of unlock stuff that is not so difficult, but a lot of people would use more often, such as step cancel unlocks, sometimes side unlocks like double back and even sometimes back unlocks for retreating. I generally wouldn't really use that stuff, but you can use it here in this deck. Anytime you step cancel, unlock step cancel, you have a sidekick punish. This is actually useful. This actually makes the spinning high kick useful. So if you feint the spinning high kick and unlock step cancel into the sidekick, that's a punish. Even though they're completely different parts of the deck, it's very useful. I can even use it here instead of after fencing punch. This is supposed to be punished, but it is a 23 threat move. So I could go down into liver knee, but instead of doing liver knee, I can unlock step cancel into sidekick. You can also retreat with the leg breaker back unlock. It's like Asphage's stamina is a big problem. and this is very useful for getting you out of danger. I don't use it that much myself, but the tool is there to use.
Also, silent lock. I noticed that silent locks can be pretty unsafe because when I fought with Meta, I could crane his side low wobble because it didn't actually hit me multiple times.
Yeah, you're right. Side unlocks are quite the risk. And on top of that, your deck has to be specially built up for it. You'll notice as well, Mephamos' deck was didn't look anything like a regular meta deck because he has it built up for all these unlocks. I don't want to talk too much on Mephos' behalf, but you can see from looking at his deck how you have to have your deck specially built up to make the most of these side unlocks.
And how do you play against other styles?
Well, you kind of just suffer. As staging, you don't have any fantastic matchups. Windfall is probably the best, as it's the easiest to mix up against using your tools. However, Windfall also has an amazing stamina game. It can make your life a living hell by regaining tons of stamina off one avoid and even depleting your own stamina off their avoids. But it does allow you to play normally as much as you can, as much as you want. You get to use your deck the most against Windfall, so it feels good to play. The matchup is not in your favor, of course. Windfall is a very strong stab, but you get to use the most of what you have against it. It feels good to play.
I'm wondering why not. Well, Forsaken is broken, but why isn't Forsaken the easiest? Because like if Unity baits you and then parries it, you can just parry in the other direction and just fuck him up like that. Or why isn't it easier?
On paper, yes, Forsaken is easier. On top of it being bugged, just the way the style is built, you do have the advantage because you mix up better against parries than you do against avoids. But in reality, or more so in my own experience, the bugs on Forsaken extend beyond just the confirms. I often find myself fighting a Forsaken player and I just cannot read what they're doing because the game doesn't properly display their parries. Sometimes it will show them parrying twice immediately. Sometimes it shows them parrying at literally the last second for imperfect. And I know it probably doesn't look that way on the other player's side, but it makes it very difficult for me to understand what the other player is trying to do. So yes, on paper I do have the advantage, but in reality I can't use that advantage because of the bugs I'm presented with. They just make it really awkward to fight. You'll still end up winning for sure. It's Forsaken is, as it is, at a massive disadvantage. Bugs, and again, like I said earlier, it's easier to mix up against parries, but it's just the actual. I'm not sure if it's part of the Forsaken bug or something, but it's just very hard to read what a Forsaken player is trying to do.
What about Cold Staggering Phaging?
Okay. Cult is an awkward matchup. You have the advantage when you're forcing the cult to absorb, because you can immediately choose to parry the cult's counterattack. This forces the cult to make an extra choice after they absorb. Do they want to continue the attack? Do they want to use their other attack? Or do they want to feint? Or do they want to block? This puts the cult in a bad position where you have the advantage. But cult get stamina when they absorb, so ultimately you end up at a disadvantage. If the cult actually sits there and absorbs and goes back to blocking and you continue your attack, you're the one at a disadvantage because you're losing the stamina game. As Phaging, you're not getting confirms. Your damage is all coming from guard breaks and mix-ups. And to get guard breaks, you need to win the stamina game. And you're not going to win the stamina game against a style that is gaining more stamina than you. Now, another reason Cult is an awkward matchup is that they can completely ignore the stopper. They don't have to worry as much about stamina because they have the absorb, and the stopper timing mix-ups become more awkward and harder to use because the absorb kind of covers for multiple moves. For example, fast cross is 12 frames, stopper is 15 frames, one absorb will catch both. If he absorbs for fast cross, they can catch the stopper. Leg breaker is 18 frames, stopper is 15. If they try to absorb the stopper, they'll also catch the leg breaker. Any 12 frame, 13, 14, 16, 17, 18 frame moves make the stopper obsolete against Cult. It becomes a very difficult game. I end up finding myself playing a very slow game against Cult. I want to make them absorb, but I can't make use of most of my tools like the stopper. And when I'm on the defensive, I lack the stamina regen to stay in against Cult. And Stagger. Stagger is your worst matchup as Svejin. Stagger defensives themselves are very awkward to parry. They constantly switch sides. Depending on what stance the opponent is in, the side to parry for the front stagger or the back stagger could be left or could be right. It changes between every stance. It's very awkward to play as a parry style. On top of all this, Stagger has an amazing stamina gain. They regain stamina off their avoids, but they also have an inbuilt stamina regen buff whenever they land an avoid. So you end up losing the stamina game, the one spot you try to do the best in through use of a stopper, and it just becomes very awkward. I end up actually relying more on playing defensive against Stagger, because anytime I'm on the offense, I am giving the Stagger a chance to use their defensive ability, regain stamina, get their stamina buff, and if it's a front or side Stagger, it's a 12 frame confirm. Actually, it's better for me to play on the defensive against the Stagger and rely on the pseudo confirms of voids and painted parries and the actual parry damage itself. It becomes a very slow game and it's not fun. But this deck has, I mentioned before, it has your crane flute crane combo. And this is useful against Stagger. It helps relieve some of the pressure. Now, whenever you do crane flute crane, whenever you do crane, your character pulls himself back. It looks like they're moving forward. They pull themselves back a bit. So when I feint the flute and I go into crane, I'm kind of pulling myself back a bit. It's a bit hard to see. But when I do this against a Stagger player and they back Stagger for the flute, the pullback from the crane will let me dodge the back Stagger and still land the hit through the back Stagger. It's very useful against Staggers, because then when you're using that little loop, you can completely ignore the back Stagger and really start punishing them. Speaking of back Stagger, that's kind of, while this tool kind of makes back Stagger go away, it's actually the one part of a Stagger defensive you want to use when you're on the offensive stage. Front Stagger confirms 12 frame, so does side Stagger. Back Stagger, it confirms 8 frames. Don't actually confirm any damage off you. So if I am trying to keep the offensive on a Stagger player, I will often find myself trying to force them to use the back Stagger, because it's the least punishing Stagger defensive. And again, because of the side the back Stagger hits changes based on your opponent's stance. Because of this, also makes it awkward to bait out the back Stagger for like a parry or something. It's just a very, very awkward matchup in general. There is one extra thing you could be doing against this. This is more me in general. I would like to improve my use of manual dodge. Manual dodge works very well against Stagger because it ignores side and back. You're at a big disadvantage as Svejin against Cult and Stagger. As Windfall, you are at a disadvantage, but you get to make the most of your deck. Forsaken is kind of weird. As Phagin against Phagin, it's not really much of a. It's awkward, but not in a bad way. As Phagin, your defense is safe, but very unpunishing. So a Phagin versus Phagin matchup, find two players that have very weak defenses. So you end up with neither player really caring about the other player avoiding or parrying. And it becomes a very boring match. Yes, you can use all your tools, and yes, you can parry their parry, but ultimately that's kind of useless, and it's a waste of stamina, because there is no net stamina gain when you parry. It just becomes that Phagin versus Phagin is just a very boring matchup. It ends up just kind of being two players mashing at each other and hoping to get damage via mix-ups against very weak defensive abilities. It's not fun. The only matchup I would really have fun as the Phagin would be up against Windfall. Against any other style, it's just not fun.
Well, unfortunate that I'm Phagin.
Oh, great. We'll have lots of fun then.
So, is there something you're trying to improve?
Yes, I mentioned it just now at the start, but I'd like to get better at manual dodging. Manual dodging, you can make a lot of strings obsolete or weaker, and it's especially useful against stagger for ignoring side and back stagger. On top of these two, I'd like to. I mentioned earlier you can back unlock the leg breaker. To be honest, this is very useful in Phagin, because Phagin, your only real stamina gain is idle stamina. The best way to get idle stamina is when you're 2 meters away from the opponent so they can't hit you. And leg breaker helps you do that. With the back unlock leg breaker. And the deck in general, this is always kind of being improved on. Even now, I'm not very happy with it. It's not like Phagin is not like Windfall or Cult, where there's one go-to deck. The main issue of making Phagin decks is that you have to be careful about making the stopper weaker. Because anytime your deck makes the stopper weaker, the deck in general is worse and could be done better on a different style.
Also about manual dodge, in the last episode I tried to mix up with leg break, side kick, and front stopper, but that was in the video that was cut out. Yes. So he just instantly could make that mix up obsolete with manual dodge. He just manual side dodge or back dodge, and instantly I couldn't do nothing with that.
Yes, manual dodge is very, very strong against the Phagin side-kick leg breaker 212 frames. It does cost stamina to use. It does cost quite a bit of stamina to use, so it's not completely free for the other player, but it is very strong against the general front Phagin setup.
So let's do some fights to see it in action.